Why is it that change can cause such emotional responses, almost like an emotional roller coaster? Well, there are three key reasons why change can be so exhausting or so emotional, and they are that change involves loss and letting go, and actually in order for us to transition in a healthy way through change, we need to be able to let go. Secondly, change threatens our sense of being in control. We need to relinquish control in order to move on to the new version of the world or the situation. And thirdly, change requires us to adjust and adapt and learn, and this takes time and effort and focus. So all of these things in combination require a lot of cognitive effort and energy, and therefore lead us to be quite tired and emotional. A model that can help us understand this process is the Kubler-Ross change curve, which was developed in the 1960s by a lady called Elizabeth Kubler-Ross to help us understand how people grieve the loss of someone. And it's been used more extensively in recent years and in recent decades to help understand the human response to significant change. So I'm going to share the model with you in a moment visually so that we can look at each of the stages of that curve together in terms of what we will see people experiencing and how we can help them move through the process of adjusting to change. But before we look at it, just a few thoughts to keep in mind. So this is a model, and like all models, it's not perfect. It is helpful, however, in helping us to understand the human response to change. We won't necessarily all experience the emotions in the same sequence that are presented in the model, and we might not experience them in the same intensity as other people. So each of us will experience emotions in different levels of intensity and go through them at a different pace, depending on how significant the change is and how much it's impacting us. We might also find that we cycle back at various points. So keep these points in mind as we go through the model. So while you look at the visual that's coming up on the screen now, you'll see that there's a horizontal and a vertical axis. So the vertical axis is about our level of competence and our morale. And so what we're talking about here is how happy you're feeling. So job satisfaction, motivation, engagement, performance, all of these things are affected over time. So the horizontal axis shows us that over time our morale and competence goes up and down depending on where we are in our adjustment to the change. As we go through each of the stages that we experience, I'm going to talk about them in three particular ways. So what does it look like when you're at this stage? What might be underlying that reaction or that behavior? And importantly for us here, how can we help to reduce the negative impact? How can we help people to move effectively and successfully through that particular change to enable them to come to a place of a healthy, balanced transition through the change process? And so let's start with shock. So on hearing the news, people may experience shock. What does this look like? People might go white in the face. They might literally be immobilized or speechless. What's behind this? Usually there is something about a lack of information, a lack of understanding, and very often it's about fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of saying something wrong, fear of doing something wrong. What can we do to help ourselves and other people move quickly through that experience of shock? We need to provide accurate information, and we probably need to revisit it and repeat it a number of times to enable people to hear the news. After shock often comes denial. And so this is where we see people continuing on as if nothing has changed or nothing has happened. So you might call it putting your head in the sand. So you may well hear people say things like, this isn't true, it doesn't apply to me, the government are lying, the leadership or management know more than they're saying, this is all propaganda. So any of those statements which essentially are saying that this isn't true are an indication that somebody is in denial. And why do we do this? So as human beings, our brains are wired to help to protect us from bad experiences and to protect us from threats And so often change presents a threat to us in terms of our security, our self-concept, may threaten our sense of control. And so going into a state of denial helps us to keep that threat at bay. So what can we do to help ourselves or other people move past or move through this stage of denial? We will need to provide clear reasoning for the change and explain the rationale for why a change has happened. We also need to be careful to avoid the gossip, the grapevine, avoid fake news. We may also want to limit or manage how much we're on social media. So we might want to make sure that our sources of information are accurate and trustworthy. And if this isn't enough to help shift someone from a place of denial, we might also need to start thinking about what are the non-negotiables. So what's the burning platform for change? If you don't change, this is going to be the consequence. If you stay on a burning platform, there will be a bad result for you or for other people. And so sometimes we might really need to consider what is actually the big picture here. What is the danger or the risk of not accepting that this change is happening or has happened already? After denial, the reality starts to hit, and this can be the most challenging time for you if you're experiencing it, but also for you if you're supporting other people coming to terms with or experiencing change. That is because we go into a period of experiencing strong negative emotions. What does that look like? These can be emotions such as shock or anger, blame, frustration. You might hear people blaming the government or pointing the finger. People may fixate on small issues and little problems. From there, people can also descend sometimes into a really low mood and maybe even depression. The reason for this is because we experience a loss of control, or we lose a sense of being in control of our lives. And so fixating on small problems or blaming other people gives us back a little bit of control, even if it's seemingly insignificant. And that's often why people resort to those types of behaviors. So there are things that we can do to help people to let go. These include listening and being patient, as people might well make mistakes. So for example, the professed technophobe who's trying a new video conferencing platform for the first time, you might need to be patient when they are unsure how to use the different functions on that platform. There's something about providing time and resources to help somebody as they adapt and learn and try out new things. And very importantly, we might want to consider symbolically marking the endings. So for example, when somebody leaves a team, we very often have an office party or a team party to mark the ending of that person's time with us. There are also cultures that are really good at marking endings, such as where the period of grieving the loss of a loved one is marked again, not just at the funeral, but 12 months later on the anniversary, where there is a time of marking the end of the formal time of grieving and celebrating that individual's life. So once people have moved into decision where they're deciding to engage positively, so you might see them identifying the positives in the situation. So alongside the grief or the tragedy or the sense of loss, they may start to see the silver linings or the potential or the possibility in the situation. What's behind this is perhaps a growing sense of control. Maybe they have been able to find a role, for example, in the change. So something we can do if we're supporting other people in change is to provide opportunities to engage and give people a role. And so, for example, doing something positive, volunteering, supporting other people can give people a sense of purpose and a positive engagement with the change. We also need to recognize and encourage and celebrate small steps in the right direction. As people are learning and adapting, there will be times where they get things wrong. And so we need to allow for those mistakes, give people the resources that they need, the time that they need, the training that they need even at times to help people transition to the new world. And then over time, people will integrate the new ways of doing things into their normal day-to-day. So what we have is a set of things that we can do to help ourselves and other people transition successfully through change. We need to connect with and provide accurate information, clear rationale, identify and explain the non-negotiables. We need to listen, give people time, have patience. We need to acknowledge what's difficult, acknowledge the losses, and allow time to talk about the negatives. And then we mark the endings. We celebrate successes, we celebrate new beginnings. We provide ways for people to engage positively with the change, be patient with mistakes, and celebrate every step in the right direction. So for each one of us, whatever the changes we might be experiencing now or recently or in the future, we are likely to go through at least some, if not all, of these stages at our own pace and in our own time. And at some point, we will find a way of integrating that into our normal lives and a way of being in the new world.